welcome to the Theorem podcast. I'm Aspasia and I'm here to shed light on alternative contemporary wisdom and knowledge and suggest feasible ways it can be incorporated into our lives. The podcast today is about excelling in life and contributing to the dynamic for a better world. My guest is Gill, a biochemical engineer with a PhD. Nav is also a business strategist, a transformation mentor, and a theta healer who has worked in both corporate and academic sectors for over 20 years. Nav recently founded Access Your Alignment and holistically coaches anyone desiring to live a thriving, purposeful, and happy life by overcoming any challenges or blocks preventing them from achieving this goal. Nav is passionate about people powerfully succeeding and excelling in life, so they go on to inspire others and demonstrate what is possible, perpetuating the transformation of individuals to the collective. Oh, I feel excited and fortunate to have this conversation. Hello, Nav, and welcome to the Theorem podcast.
Hi, Aspasia. Thank you for having me.
Who, first of all, let me ask you, with such a hardcore scientific background, how come you're doing what you're doing today?
It's a very interesting question. I think it's something that started from a very young age. I had a very strong religious upbringing, which served me really well to a point, I would say. When I was young and sort of quite naive, I always had this sense and this feeling that there was something more. There was always something more out there. There was something greater, that a lot more was possible than what we could tangibly see and feel. And this was a sense that I had from a very young age. And sort of like with religious guidance, that kind of evolved, but I felt like I kept, for me on a personal level, hitting a glass ceiling. And this is as life went on and many life events happen and the journey of life takes its ups and downs, I started to understand spirituality on a whole new level. And this idea of a higher power, a greater power, I started to ponder what that really meant for me. So for me, I kind of transcended the religious element and started to branch out more into, I would say, the purity and the essence of spirituality, which for me is very simple because it's just your connection with the universe, the divine, or however you want to call it. And I think over time, over a number of years and various different life events that happen that teach us our lessons, sometimes in a very difficult way, sometimes in a very fun way, I started to gain a deeper understanding of spirituality. And I think one of the biggest things that I learned, which now feels very simple when I talk about it, is that we separate ourselves out from this divinity. We put divinity on, or the universe on a pedestal. We separate it out from ourselves. And over time, I started to realize through my own sort of challenges, my own experiments, you could say with the universe, that it's actually all within me,
Mm-hmm.
that I am of the universe and the universe resides in me. So I am not separated. And this might sound a bit funny, it might sound a bit quirky, but then that therefore makes me divine. And this then perpetuated, it was like a mind blowing moment when I realized this. And it simplified so many things in my life because if we hold divinity and the universe as all powerful and sacred, then why are we not all powerful and sacred? And then there's a fine line between, well, is that arrogant? Who do you think you are?
Mm-hmm.
And I had to work through those challenges as well, because it's not a conversation that is maybe widely accepted by many. And everybody's, allowed to have their opinion about this. And I started to realize, well, if I would take care of the universe, if I would take care and respect the divine or God or source energy, whatever you want to call it, then why would I not take care of me if it resides in me? And why would I not respect myself? And in doing all of this, I started to feel myself elevate. I started to gain clarity. I would say that I started to have a bird's eye view of my entire life and everything that was going on in it. And this was quite profound for me. So my perception started to shift. shift. My understanding of people, situations started to shift. And so my energy and my reaction and how I participated started to shift. And then I started paying attention to how that was received. And it came from, because it was all coming from a place of divinity. And for me, divinity means two very simple things. Like I said, I simplified it for myself, is unconditional love
Hmm.
and complete freedom. And when we're operating from a place of unconditional love and complete freedom, our intention is always pure. And the energy of that is so high vibrating that the majority of people receiving it, even when it's in a challenging situation, is actually really good and really well. So that's been my experience of how kind of ended up in spirituality. I think my science background, that was something I was very passionate about since I was at school. I was a diehard scientist at school that led me to my engineering sort of education all the way through to PhD. I think the turning point for me where I really started questioning spirituality sort of beyond this young, naive perception of there's got to be more is, various different things happen in life that call into question the direction that you're going in. Why are things happening in this way? The master plan didn't quite work out. So, what is the plan? And I think my biggest realization there was I was living a life that was dictated by my external environment
Hmm.
and expectations, whether it was from family, whether it's from friends. And this is no criticism to them. My job, expectations of just performing. I was one of these performing, high performing people. I wanted to excel at everything, I wanted to help everybody. And I started to get to a point where I started to feel very depleted. And I was like, this is not sustainable. There has to be another way. Like, where do I fit into this entire equation? And I started to realize that I didn't. I was literally running all of these things without really considering myself and how I felt and what was right for me. I would say that was the other turning point where I started to realize I'm important. And we oftentimes put ourselves at the bottom of the list, or I did anyway. And that kind of, again, springboarded me into sort of questioning, well, where am I going? What am I doing? What does it mean? I started to realize that I was lacking purpose and I was not doing things while they might have been meaningful. So lots of career success, lots of good things in family, but I wasn't fulfilled and I felt empty. And for me, that started to become an issue. And then I went on an exploration of, well, how do I become self full? And I guess that's what perpetuated my journey from science to spirituality. And for a very long time in my life, I kept them very separate. There were various, it's like Nav, the biochemical engineer who works in academia or the corporate world, and then Nav, the person who's spiritual in her own time. So my life was very much compartmentalized. And I would say that the next big realization that I had was compartmentalization doesn't work
Hmm.
because everything's connected. And I have to be very honest, it's taken me a very long time to have the courage to merge these two worlds together, which is where sort of more recently I started this Access Your Alignment. And this is where I would say it's kind of the best of what I've taken from both worlds and sort of merged it together. And I have to say that it's brought a level of peace and contentment within me. It's like I finally found my fit and I
Hmm.
finally came to a place where I'm really owning that I can be this scientist person, very analytical, engineering brain with this very kind of out there spirituality mindset at the same time.
Wow, you mentioned so many things that I want to ask you about. First of all, you talked about religion and how religion is, in a way, we perceive it as a container for spirituality, yet it is a container. It's like a box with rules and limits, in my opinion. In a way, I've been in a kind of similar journey myself, struggling a lot with the arrogance that you mentioned. And the question whether it was my ego wanting to be,
Hmm.
to come first and to have priority over other things has been a huge struggle for me personally. I've realized that when I do have joy as my goal and I do take care of myself, I can be really present for my kids and for my clients and for
Hmm.
everybody around me. And I also feel
Hmm.
better. This reminds me of a quote by Master Co. He says, "Inner peace is our nature." Yet everybody, or almost everybody around us, struggles, stresses out over things. Why do you think this is so?
So just a point on the religion, because I'm
Oh,
quite because it's been such a poignant thing for me in my life. So I came to, this is again my opinion. I came to the conclusion that the universe is so abundant and so diverse and so magical, that it's given, and everybody in it is completely unique. Okay, the way we perceive the world, like 10 people can look at the same thing and have a completely different thought and opinion about it. The way we perceive the world is completely different through our own eyes, and that's a beautiful thing, because I think a lot of times we are criticized for not having similar mindsets about what's right and wrong and good and bad and how we should be performing. And to a certain extent, when it's a morality thing, of course, but generally we should have freedom of operation, we have freedom of thinking. And if we are all divine and we are all unique, we have so many options. There is abundance of options of how we choose to connect and interact with ourselves, with the universe, with the world around us. And I think there's always a line of thinking and a cohort of people who need religion. That is their way of connecting.
hmm.
And because I've done these experiments for myself, because I'm like, well, why can't I be more religious? Why am I not more obedient? Like, why am I not conforming more? And for me, on a personal level, everything in me was like, well, I don't really want to do that. And I went through the guilt and I went through all of these kind of thoughts and feelings. It's like, well, does that make me a bad person? Does that mean that I'm not doing it right? Does that mean I'm not going to be happy? Does that mean I don't deserve? And the truth is, no. It just means that my path was different and I choose the path of like simple spirituality, and that works for me. And you said something very important, because if it brings you joy, joy is the essence of life. That's the most important thing. And if anything brings you joy, and that's your intention, and that intention is linked to unconditional love, then that's the right thing for you. So I think everything has its place because we are so diverse. It's freedom of choice. Some people can choose to be. It's when we start to put, like you said, the rules and the conditions that make it difficult, because that starts to make individuals consciously or subconsciously feel trapped. And then
Hmm.
that perpetuates a whole bunch of other thoughts, feelings, and emotions. So I just wanted to say that about religion. And then you were saying that when you are in a state of joy, you feel most like yourself. You feel energized. You feel, and that is beautiful, because that is the essence of joy. But then we live in the world, right? And there are stresses, and that is inevitable. And I think for me, because I'm a massive stress head. If you ask anybody who knows me, I've come a long way in how I manage stress. Yeah, a long, long way. That doesn't mean that I don't still get stressed, but I think what I've found is this, again, it's very simple, but it took me a long time to understand this, is I can't control my external environment. I simply can't. The world is going to go round. There are going to be triggers. There are going to be people with different ways of thinking. There are going to be situations at work. There are going to be situations with family, situations in the world that are happening that are going to trigger stresses. And I think we have to be self responsible, right? So it's very easy to get stuck into getting all consumed with a situation. And it's this level of self responsibility and inner connection with trying to understand and taking a moment to pause. So, people talk about reflection and self awareness. We have to understand why this is impacting us. And if we can catch that, and we can kind of do an analysis and a reflection of like, what does it mean? What is it playing on? Why is it triggering me? how do I manage this? How do I handle this? If we can get into a solution mode mindset rather than getting all consumed, for me, that was a big game changer. And oftentimes, my late brother used to say all the time, and to be honest, I didn't really understand this until after he passed away. He used to always say to me, Nav, what's the worst that can happen? And honestly, this has become a bit of a mantra for me because I look at everything now and I'm like, literally, in this situation, what is the worst that can happen? And for me personally, if I can make peace with the worst case scenario, when you back calculate, it's actually not that bad.
Hmm.
So I think there are different levels to this in terms of how people manage stress. And I think self awareness is key. This reflection period is key. And we also have to think about how these external influences are affecting us. For me, I had to understand my core foundation and what I stand for. So, what is my core foundation? What is my integrity? And I got to a point where I'd honed this so well that it became an unshakable foundation. So anything that came and hit me, unexpected, unknown situations, we are by nature, by the way that we work and that the way we operate, there's so much order and control in our lives that we become, to a certain extent, and I'm very guilty of this, control freaks. We need to control outcomes. We need to control so that things work, so life goes on, so we make money, so the family is happy, so that we feel like we are happy. But the truth is, we have no control. And I learned this really the hard way. So the universe taught me some hard lessons. We have no control. And the day I realized we actually have no control. We don't know what's going to happen the moment we wake up in the morning. We are constantly facing unknown situations, no matter how small or how big in life. We can only control where we are up to. And I think this requires also a level of kindness. And I feel like that gets overlooked because we are constantly performing. That's again how we're conditioned. What am I going to do with the situation? I've got to find a solution. I've got to fix it. I've got to meet the deadline. I've got to make my wife happy. I've got to do this for my husband. But we forget to do it with kindness because we can only go with where we're up to. And I think if we can do things with kindness, and here I really mean kindness for ourselves, if we do this from a place of kindness and just allow ourselves to go with the flow, I think things unfold in a much smoother way, especially when we're dealing with unknown situations, unknown conversations, challenging situations, or stressful environments. This has been sort of my little journey of how I've come to this point within myself.
Hmm. If we could use an example of a person who is faced with a roadblock and they see no options and they struggle and they are being hard on themselves, what advice would you give them and how would you help them to think differently and work around this?
So I think the answer to this is a very deep question, Aspasia. And I would say, if I'm being brutally honest, this is not a quick fix. So there are two levels to this. There is the quick fix version in terms of I've got this situation right now. How am I going to get through it and get the outcome that I need, or at least get the outcome enough that I need? And then there is a deeper dive into this that actually is connected to the fibers that we're made of and the belief systems that we carry. So if we just break it down into like, this is a situation right now, this is what I have to do right now, because you're always going to get to the end destination. We are conditioned for this. If we are determined, let's assume this individual is determined and they are successful, the choice is the route that we take to get to that destination and the process, the impact it had on the individual, right? So was it a tough route? Was it an easy route? And I'm a firm believer of when you are in flow, even a tough situation can be navigated. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it can be navigated from a place of peace, contentment, and ease and grace. So let's go with scenario one. This has got to be solved right now. They haven't done any self reflection. They haven't done any of the deep work, and they need to get there now. For me, in this situation, you just need to get really strategic. You need to get
Mm-hmm.
strategic about understanding what is the issue that needs to be addressed, or the work that needs to be done, or the conversation that needs to be had. Who are the stakeholders? Understanding a little bit who the stakeholders are, what the situation requires, what the risks are, understanding yourself and your strengths, understanding what you bring to the table, and then making a plan of what needs to happen strategically to execute the outcome that is desired. So basically, this gets hardcore analytical, right? In order to execute on this task or this conversation, or whatever the situation is. And the whole piece of putting, so that's basically how to go from this is the problem, that's the solution that I need. Then there is the bit on the personal side that you mentioned. It's like, well, I'm really hard on myself. And for me, that starts to bridge with the second approach, because being hard on ourselves is our inner voice, right? That's our life experience, that's our conditioning, that's our self perception, that's the value and the worth that we put on ourselves. And this is where the struggle comes. So, this individual always, if they're strategic and they're analytical and they approach this like, I've just got to get this done, they're always going to reach the end goal. But that inner voice, which basically, I'm going to say, beats them up along the way,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
makes it a struggle. And that is really what needs to be addressed. And you can do affirmations, you can do your self talk to kind of dampen down the inner voice. You can remember, sometimes we have to recall, like, what did I do that was really well? Like, amp yourself up, give yourself a pep talk, and it will get you through. But that's not addressing the root cause of where this feeling, or this kind of like beating myself up, making myself feel bad, making myself feel like I'm not good enough. It's not addressing the root cause. So in scenario one, that would be your quick fix of reaching your end goal, because that's what you've got to do now. In scenario two, we go a bit deeper, because if this individual really wants to eliminate that and be
Mm-hmm.
in flow and have freedom of operation, it doesn't change again the situation. The situation might be very difficult, the task, the job might be very difficult, but the way they approach it will be very different. So this is where belief systems come in, because you have to question, where is that coming from? Why do I even have it? And belief systems are basically your programs that are in your subconscious mind that drive all of your behaviors, your emotions, and your self talk. It's the value that you
Mm-hmm.
put on yourself, it's the way you react to your environment. And what creates these belief systems, I mean, in summary, from the moment you're born, it's everything that you learn. So your everything that your parents teach you, and they're going to do their best to bring you up in the best possible way, impart the best knowledge that they can, but they have their belief systems, they have their life experience, they have their fears, which they then also pass on to you in a way to teach you in the best way and protect you. Then you have everything that you learn through life, everything that you life experiences, life events, trauma, abuse. And trauma and abuse is a sliding scale. What is traumatic for one individual is not necessarily traumatic for another one. We can't put a measure on that. If it affects you, it's going to affect your belief system. It will go in to rewire your subconscious mind. And
Mm-hmm.
your brain system is there to protect you at all costs. Its primary function is to keep you alive,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's to your detriment. So your belief systems start to become limiting. And when they become limiting, that's when you call into question. So do your reactions become sort of like, well, I can't do this, lack of self-confidence, your self-talk starts to change. So how do we change belief systems? I have a practice that there are very different modalities that address this. My particular go-to that I feel like has worked best for me and I use in my practice is theta healing. So theta is a brainwave. It's the deepest meditative state. And with using the techniques of theta healing, I'm able to help people identify what the issue is. Or sometimes they're already self-aware. They're like, I do this. Like, my
Mm-hmm.
self-talk is really bad. I beat myself up. But we go one step further and we start to dig on, where does this come from? What is the root cause? And your brain is very intelligent. So it will never make a belief system that is not serving a purpose. It will always serve a purpose, whether it was to protect you or to teach you something. The challenge is when you have all of the good stuff, but it's attached to something negative or a negative experience or something that you witness that's negative. And what we want to do is detach it from the negative so it's no longer limiting. We keep the learning. So it's like your brain's a filing cabinet. It's like, I want the good stuff because that was really good learning. And we detach it from the negative. And that's where we effectively rewire that belief system to align with you. And I think the most important point here is align with you, because I come back to, you are a unique individual. You are not like your mom and dad. You're not like your siblings. You're not like your friends. You are unique. So you want this to align with you. And the moment you come into alignment, that is flow. There is like this sense of peace, this sense of ease. It doesn't mean that the problem isn't big. It doesn't mean the problem isn't hard, but your approach completely changes. And when you can address very powerful belief systems that are linked to your self worth, to your value, to your confidence, to your place in the world, to how you fit, to your purpose, to the fact that you deserve to be powerful and it's okay to be powerful, with grace, with love, with compassion and kindness. Because we associate power with something very hierarchical. And there is that power dynamic, but I'm talking about inner power, self power. um, I think that when you can address those limiting belief systems that impact those key virtues, those key characteristics that help shape us and become who we want to be, our true self, I think that's a very powerful position to be in. And then when you rewind and you address situations that are difficult or tasks that are difficult, it makes it much easier. And I would go one step further to say, when you are in flow, when you've addressed this, the inspiration, the clarity, the creativity is so much more boosted. It's that connection with your inner self and a deeper understanding of how you're connected to everything around you. And that's a very powerful position to be in.
From my personal experience, what you're describing has been a journey towards being able to let go of what things are supposed to be like, to allow. I haven't achieved it as much as I would like to, but still, I definitely got to taste it. Letting go of how things are supposed to be, allowing myself to melt into what is going on and what I feel and
Mhm,
where this is taking me. Yes, this is what connected me to my power. I'm
mhm.
wondering, how can a person help themselves to let go of control? How can a person help themselves get in touch with this inner power and the flow? Release control and be in the flow, and also let go of expectations.
So this is I would say this is the challenge of life. This is a constant battle, I imagine the majority of us have. I've personally had this battle. I continue. It's much better for me. It's I continue to sometimes have this conflict within myself, and I have to come back to my core foundation. I have to come back to who I am, what I stand for, what is important to me, because you need something to recalibrate back to, especially when you feel like, okay, why do I need to control this situation so much? And it's not that you don't have control. We can control ourselves. So we have control about our reactions, our emotions, the way we act, the actions that we take, which then does impart some control to the situation. But we don't have all over control of the outcome. And I think that's what is sometimes the most challenging thing, is because we will have a level of control and then it gets a bit shaky, and other factors come in and we can't control the outcome. And that's where the problem starts, because that's what breeds expectations, because we have an expectation of the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the biggest challenge, right? Because I had my entire life mapped out for like the next 20 years, and then it all blew up around me, and I was like, where do I go from here? um So that the expectations, and it's not bad to have expectations. We need to have aspirations, we need to have goals, we need to know at least a little bit of a roadmap of where we want to be. But I think the key is
Hmm.
flexibility. You need to be flexible in the process because there are so many moving parts. There are so many moving parts in the people who are involved, the external environment, and the universe. And I think sometimes the aspect of the universe's participation is overlooked completely. I mean, this is an all powerful energy that surrounds us. And what I have learned over time, sometimes when I've tried to over control a situation, is sometimes the universe knows best. And we focus so much on, I need to go from A to B and I need to figure out the how. Sometimes we put too much pressure and expectation on the how. And what
Hmm.
I've had to train myself, really train myself, because I am a control freak, is to release a little bit of the control on the how. And like I said earlier, you have to recalibrate a little bit. It's like, what is my core foundation? What are my values? What is my integrity? Trusting yourself. We lose self trust in controlling situations. We start to doubt. We start to put more pressure on. I've got to. Whereas if we start to just focus on our intention, that doesn't mean that we don't do the work. So it's not a fluffy, like, oh my gosh, I just want this. This is going to happen. I'm just going to sit back, relax. Universe, you take care of it. Yeah, the universe doesn't work like that. So but your approach is, how do I figure out, again, against my core values, against my foundation, against my integrity? And I'm even going to use the word authenticity, because all of these things drive who is your authentic self. And once this is secure, the level of confidence in trusting yourself starts to increase, because you're like, well, I know who I am, I know what I stand for, I know what I'm capable of. And this is all within yourself. The level of self trust starts to increase, the confidence in yourself starts to increase. And it's then thinking about, well, from this foundation, what is my intention? And if our intention is pure, if our intention is genuine, if our intention is from a place of compassion, kindness, and unconditional love, then it's smoother. If our
Hmm.
intention is based on expectation, somebody expects me to do this, I've got to do this because I want a return. If my intention is not aligned with my core values, that is where you start to feel like you're going against the grain. And that is where you need to check in. What is my intention? Why is that happening? And that's where I started to realize a lot of the things that I was doing was very uphill, because the place where my intention was coming from was not aligned with who I was. It wasn't really what I wanted. It wasn't really yes when it was really yes and no when it was really no. And this comes down to then having the courage to accept yourself, to trust yourself, understanding your why. And then this builds confidence in having boundaries. And I think we talk a lot about boundaries and the fact that they're really important, but like, how do we put them in place, right? And sometimes boundaries and not being able to have boundaries are linked to belief systems, which is conditioning, which needs to be addressed on a deeper level. But boundaries are actually a really good thing, because if we can have boundaries of, well, this is what I'm capable of, this is how far I can go. It's kind of having self-respect to a certain extent. It's knowing your value to a certain extent.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it's also then being like, right, if I've come this way, whether it's an individual, whether it's working with the universe, however it is, then you can also see, well, what else is available to me for me to use, whether it's resources, whether it's opportunities. I'm going to use the word miracles. And we allow the universe to intervene, because, to be honest, a lot of stuff is out of our control. So we can only approach things as far as the resources and the capability we have on our own. And in doing that, in having boundaries, in having instilling all these things that I've mentioned, you start to release control of the how it's going to happen a little bit more. And the path, from my experience, becomes a little bit smoother, because you've got to remember, your intention is a very powerful energy. And I'm a huge believer in energy. If you put out a pure intention, that resonates, that carries a vibration. and the universe does respond. I've done too many experiments with this. The universe does respond, and this is where we release the pressure of the how. Sometimes the how is nothing to do with, it's that's not our job. And if it starts to become our job, you will start to see that unfolding as you go down your path. And I think the other important piece to check in with as you go along this process is, am I in a state of peace? Am I in a state of contentment? Am I in a state of joy? And I don't mean ecstatic joy, I mean internal state of peaceful joy. And if that is again what you calibrate to based on your core foundation, your authenticity, your integrity, if you can recalibrate back to that, and the moment your calibration is off, you need to check into like what is interfering with that energy, that fundamental energy of peace, contentment, and joy. And I think that's like your, if you think about it as a roadmap, that will help you unfold your roadmap of like, well, how do I calibrate back? What action do I need to take? What do I need to maybe let go of or release control of? Or can I change my approach in how I'm dealing with this situation or this person?
This last bit is, in my opinion, very, very important because it has helped me a lot. It's much easier to see what sabotages or messes up our feeling good or being in joy. It's easier, I think, to see than yeah, because when we feel good and something happens and we're like bummed, it's easy to identify that, easier
Hmm.
in my opinion than to actually pursue um, constant joy. It's easier to protect it this way and
Yeah.
to know what to avoid or what to take care of. That having clear
Hmm.
intentions is very important because each thought is an entity, and the
Hmm.
clearer it is, the more possible, the more probable it is that it will happen the way we want it to happen. About the importance of intentions being clear and specific. And I absolutely agree with that because intentions are thoughts, are words, are entities. And the clearer they are,
Hmm.
the more specific the arrow is to this reality.
I think you hit the nail on the head. And I'm really pleased that this resonates with you about the intention, because I guess to summarize a lot of what we've been talking about is that we can simplify a lot of things in our life with understanding what our intention is. Because, and if we align, so connectivity, like we hear a lot of information on Instagram, on various social media platforms. Many people also talk about this connection with yourself.
Mhm.
So self connection with yourself, a deeper understanding of yourself, which kind of builds on a lot of things that I've mentioned earlier. I would say this is your fundamental mission. And everything, if you think about these being your roots, your fundamental mission in life is to connect with yourself. Everyone's arrived in this world as a unique individual. You are your own blueprint. There is nobody like you. We might share similar traits, similar opinions. There's a collective consciousness. It's the way we've been raised in different communities, different backgrounds. Again, the diversity is a beautiful thing, but we are, in essence, completely unique. And I think the challenges start to come when we start to deviate from owning this uniqueness. And I again link that to our own personal divinity, our own personal power, and therefore our own authenticity. So the further we move as we go through life and we experience external influences, other people's opinions, how vulnerable we are, how self secure we are, what our self talk is, our belief systems, all. So there's so many strands to this. There isn't a one thing that influences this about us. And while that's all okay, it's this challenge comes when we start to move away from who we truly are. And I come back to the universe is so amazing and so abundant. why would you want to be? We strive to mimic good behaviors. We strive to mimic what success is or what our idea of success is, or we are inspired. And it's great to be inspired. But when you try to copy that, when you
Mm-hmm.
try to, it's different. There's a fine line between learning lessons and being like, wow, that really inspired me. I think I'm going to go away and do that for me. That's great. But when you sort of make it a fundamental, I need to be like that person, or I need to be this in this situation, you're moving away from your fundamental core, your fundamental blueprint, what makes you unique. And that starts to create challenges. That's where you start to feel very disconnected within yourself. That's when you start to feel, even with success, even getting the outcomes that you want, you have those moments where you're like, oh yeah, okay, I made it, but like I'm really unsatisfied.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why would you be unsatisfied if you actually achieved what you truly wanted to achieve and if it was aligned? So again, I come back to the most important thing you can focus on in your life is alignment with yourself, is to fully embrace perfect imperfections, because you were created in this way. There is no accident in the way that you are created. There is no accident in the way that you approach the world. There is no accident in your thoughts and feelings. And it's okay if they are different to somebody else. And it's this level of absolute self acceptance and embracing who you are and trusting yourself that perpetuates your power. That brings your vibration to a level that is aligned with you, but then you project that, because if that sets your intention, and you said something very important about intention, because intention is it does carry an energy. And if the intention is wrong, it's not going to feel like a good energy.
Uh-huh.
So when you are in this high vibrating state of self-acceptance, of knowing who you are, of accepting your uniqueness, that you are different to other people and everybody's different from each other, and the fact that this is okay. And again, this is really hard in our society because we have rules and regulations of what is right and what is wrong. If we can have a level of self-acceptance, we will find a way to function. And this is
Mm-hmm.
where I'm very passionate about sort of helping people reach this place, reach their potential, understand their authenticity in the work that I do. Because for me, everything's connected. I'm connected to you. This conversation, I've learned so much from you already. You've learned so much from me already. We will go into our lives and we will carry that energy and we will impart it to other people. This is how it's like a web. So when I help people evolve and connect with themselves and reach their potential, whether in any aspect of their life, it doesn't matter if it's work, if it's their love life, if it's their personal life, if it's their relationships, if it's with money, like there's no judgment about what you want to work on or what you want to align with. The point is that in doing that and up leveling people, increasing their vibration, they spread that energy on. And that is the most beautiful and most powerful thing. But it all comes back to, what is the intention? What is your why? Because if
Mm-hmm.
you know that and it's aligned with joy, and I will even say quite boldly, joy is your birthright. Joy is not something that needs to be earned. You don't need to work hard to create joy. Joy is something that just exists. And you can literally make a choice, because we all have freedom to choose. You can make a choice to be in a state of joy or not. This might take some training just because of the way that we've been conditioned. But if we can just, again, recalibrate back to that energy, it's a game changer.
Well, when we are aligned with ourselves, two things happen. We inspire other people to do the same, and we trigger people.
This is very true. So I'm going to start with, you can't argue with energy. And again, I'm a scientist. I was a researcher for a very long time. So I like doing experiments. And it's not that I go around triggering people, by the way. I don't do that. But I do a lot of experiments with myself, how I approach situations, just to find, my calibration, to find like what resonates with me. And I do a lot of experiments with the universe. Okay. Um, so I come back to the point of, you can't argue with energy. If you are a high vibrating person and you are projecting unconditional love, it is addictive. It might be annoying, but it is addictive. So, uh, and I will say this: it's, like, the example that I normally use when I talk about this is, you could have a very smart person, very intelligent, saying all the right things, imparting great wisdom, and you really want this information, but you just can't, you don't know why, but you just don't want to be around them. So you can't get away fast enough. It's like, let me just take what I need and I just need to go. It's because your energies are not resonating. And that is a very important thing to not ignore, because when we talk about being connected with ourselves, this is like an intuitive thing. This is an intuitive gut feeling, because we are all vibrating at different frequencies, depending on where we're up to in our life, our perception of the world, our perception of ourselves, and how much work we've done on ourselves to kind of get to a point of contentment and peace and happiness. All of these things have different vibrations. So everyone's at a different place. And then you'll have somebody who's just like really chilled. They're not particularly imparting great wisdom, but they just have really good vibes. And you're like, I don't know why, but I just want to sit. I just feel good. I feel good sitting with you. I feel good listening to you. I'm feeling good within myself. That's a matched vibration. So I come back to, and you know it before you consciously know it. It's a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
You can't
Mm-hmm.
ignore it. So you can't argue with energy. And I came to realize, when I set my intention about why I want to do something and how I want to do something, from a place of, my intention is pure, it's from a place of unconditional love, compassion, and I know my why, and I'm very clear about why it's important to me. Very rarely not been able to take that forward, or move a crowd, or bring people on board with my idea, or encourage people to think about things in a different way, because you go in with love. And this might sound a bit fluffy, but love is the ultimate energy. Who doesn't want to feel that? Who doesn't want to feel, we don't talk about it enough, but who doesn't want to feel that? And it's the aspect of unconditional love, because also the perception of love is very different for different people, depending on how they've learnt love. So I stress unconditional love, without judgment, without expectation, and with acceptance of everything and everyone around. um, the challenge comes, so those who you say that we trigger, this is where I come back to boundaries and responsibility, because we are only responsible for ourselves, and we should not apologize for being in this high vibrating state of joy. I'm sorry, I'm not going to apologize for being in a joyous state. I've worked really hard to get to this point, and I'm not going to bring that down. That doesn't mean that we need to throw it in someone's face, because when it's an energy of joy, it's not something that you need to talk about. You just project it. It's for you. It's not for anybody else. And I think that's the difference, because that understanding of people who constantly talk about it and kind of, I guess, shove it down your throat, which gets a bit annoying, versus those people who quietly just know it and understand
Mm.
it for themselves, and just, you can't turn it off then. It's literally your light. It's the light and the energy that you project to the world. The people who get triggered, that's obviously playing on something within them that is lacking, or that they need to work on. That's from my experience, that from when I've had that. And because I've managed to get to this state of self-awareness, and I kind of view the world in a slightly different way, from like this bird's eye view, as much as I can, I start to see that in that person, and it actually fills me with so much more compassion. So I've really transitioned from being like, oh my God, you're triggered. Like, maybe I need to stop being who I am, or maybe I'm really annoyed with you. Like, why are you triggered by this? It can go both ways. And I started to realize, hang on a minute, I feel compassion for you, because
Mm-hmm.
there is something you are feeling right now,
Yep.
because of what I'm projecting. It's not my responsibility though. That's your responsibility. You need to work on that. You need to deal with that. You need to come back to, what's my foundation? What do I stand for? What's my integrity? You need to understand how to recalibrate back, because we should not let that external trigger impact us. It's a very hard thing to do. I will stress that. because it's emotional. Sometimes we can't control our behaviors, but that is not my responsibility. That is that other person's responsibility. And that other person has a choice. And I keep coming back to choice and freedom of choice to be triggered and then be like, hang on a minute, why am I being triggered? What is going on here for me? Or they can get into the mindset of like, well, I just don't like it. I'm just going to be triggered. I'm going to be annoyed or I'm going to be upset. Again, that is a choice in the same way as being in a state of joy is a choice.
Yes, I think that the message to take home here is that being aligned with yourself is absolutely worth it,
Mhm.
absolutely doable, and it's great for the world. The world wants it. The universe wants us to be ourselves. Everything and everybody wants us to be us, unapologetically,
Mhm.
us, ourselves.
Mhm.
Well, for me, seeing people being in alignment with themselves is very inspiring, and I love seeing it. And these people can be of wonderful service, and they can offer light to the people around them, and it's so 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 good for everyone. From everything you've said, this is the essence, that it's okay and it's doable to be ourselves, and it's the
Mhm.
best thing we can do.
Absolutely just love what you said, and I think you've summarized it so beautifully. I guess the only thing that I would add is that we are absolutely here to have our best life, to have a full and joyous life. And I think the more we start to align with this energy of joy and just simplifying our intention, it becomes easier to move forward and to be in flow, to be connected with ourselves, to recalibrate to our foundation, to our integrity, to our authenticity, and really to this energy of joy, which is, as I mentioned, our birthright. So, yeah,
Nav, thank you so much for this inspiring conversation. I loved it.
thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this discussion, Aspasia. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Theorem podcast. Connect with me on social media at Aspasia Provu and at theorem.podcast and share your thoughts. You may support us on Patreon. Visit the website aspasiaprovu.com/theorem for more. Τα λέμε σύντομα. Meaning talk to you soon in Greek. Aspasia's Theorem podcast does not provide advice, medical or any other kind. It just presents the opinions of its host and guests. If you have any specific problems, please visit your physician or a medical expert for help. Anything said should not be taken as a replacement for medical, clinical, or professional advice, diagnosis, or medical intervention. The episodes of Aspasia's Theorem podcast may, at times, cover sensitive topics including, but not limited to, mental health, nutrition, health, politics, spirituality, alternative medicine, energy healing, and the use of plant medicines. You're advised to refrain from continuing if you are adversely impacted by any of these topics.